Chapter 16 The Elder Son, by Mary Wollstonecraft Shelley. My father was the second son of a wealthy baronet. As he and his elder brother formed all the family of my grandfather, he inherited the whole of his mother's fortune, which was considerable, and settled on the younger children. He married a lady whom he tenderly loved, and having taken orders and procured preferment, retired to his deanery in the north of Ireland, and there took up his abode. When I was about 10 years old, he lost my mother. I was their only child. My father was something of an ascetic, if such name can be given to a rigid adherence to the precepts of morality, which arose from the excess, and not the absence of feeling. He adored my mother, he mourned for her to the verge of insanity, but his grief was silent, devouring, and gloomy. He never formed another matrimonial engagement. Secluding himself entirely from society and given up to the duties of his sacred calling, he passed his days in solitude or in works of charity among the poor. Even now I cannot remember him without awe. He was a tall and, I thought, a venerable-looking man, for he was thin and pale and he was partly bald. His manners were cold and reserved. He seldom spoke, and when he did it was in such measured phrase, in so calm and solemn a voice, and on such serious topics, as resembled rather oracular enunciation than familiar conversation. He never caressed me. If ever he stroked my head or drew me on his knee, I felt a mingled alarm and delight difficult to describe. Yet, strange to say, my father loved me almost to idolatry, and I knew this and repaid his affection with enthusiastic fondness, notwithstanding his reserve and my awe. He was something greater, and wiser, and better, in my eyes than any other human being. I was the sole creature he loved, the object of all his thoughts by day and his dreams by night. Abstracted and even severe as he seemed, he has visited my bedside at night, subdued by womanly fears, and hung over me for hours, to assure himself of my life and well-being. He has watched by me in sickness night after night with unwearied assiduity. He never spoke harshly to me, and treated me at once with a distance and gentleness hard to be understood. When I was 18 he died. During his last illness the seal was taken from his lips, and his heart threw off that husk within which he had hitherto concealed its true nature. He died of a rapid consumption, which terminated his existence within 6 months of his being first taken ill. His body wasted under the effects of mortal disease, but his soul assumed new life and energy, and his temper became as soft and demonstrative as it had hitherto been repulsive and concentrated. He became my father, friend, and brother all in one, 1,000 dear relationships combined in one stronger than any. This sudden melting, this divine sensibility, which expanded at once, having been so long shut up and hid, was like a miracle. It fascinated and entranced me. I could not believe that I was about to lose him at the moment when we discovered each other's worth. I mean by that expression, as regards myself, all the happiness that he derived from the truth and vivacity of my filial affection. It were vain to attempt to refer even to our conversations, the sublime morality he inculcated, the tenderness and charity of his expressions, the overflowing and melting eloquence with which he talked of the affections of this world, and his aspirations after a better. He died suddenly at last, as I was playing to him a simple air my mother loved. It was a moment of horror, yet of solemn and pious resignation. His soul had sought its native heaven and congenial companion, might it be blessed. Yet I had lost him, and grief immeasurable was the result. The impression of the misery I suffered can never be entirely worn from my mind. I often wonder my heart did not break with the violence of my sorrow. I had been brought up at the deanery, apart from all acquaintances. I had had a governess, a most worthy woman, who married just before my father was taken ill, and who kindly came to me when all was over, to endeavor to console the inconsolable. One of my father's objects in life had been to accumulate a fortune for me, not for the sake of placing me in the dangerous situation of an heiress, but to render me independent. It thus happened that by his ever-lamented death I inherited considerable wealth. His own fortune, my mother's, and his savings formed the sum of £50,000. He left me under the guardianship of his elder brother, Sir Richard Grey, with only one restriction, that I was not to marry, even with my uncle's consent, till I was 21. He wished thus to secure me freedom of choice and time for deliberation. To this sagacious clause I owe the happiness of my life. As soon as my health and the first agony of my grief would permit, I left the deanery. My kind governess accompanied me to Dublin, and Sir Richard Grey came hither himself to fetch me and to carry me to his seat in England. I was beyond measure surprised when I saw my uncle. He was a year older than my father, my venerable father, and he looked in comparison a boy. He was indeed under 50, and had at first sight a juvenility of aspect quite astonishing. On examination, the traces of years and care became perceptible, and there was a haggardness in his face which contrasted strangely with its expression of thoughtlessness. No one could be kinder than he was to me, and yet his very kindness was revolting, from the contrast he formed with my lost parent. The world, society, and pleasure occupied his time and thoughts. Solitude and misery were synonymous terms with him, and he called everything solitude that did not include the idea of a crowd. He rattled away during our journey, thinking his anecdotes and good stories would enliven me. He was so sorry that it was not the season that I could go to London. He would have invited his daughter, Lady Height, to his seat, that he might arrange a party to enliven it for me, but she was on the continent, and his other married daughter was resident in Scotland. What was to be done? He had engagements himself during the shooting season at various gentlemen's houses, and I should be moped to death at Beech Grove. This account of the seclusion of my retreat was all my comfort. I declared that nothing should induce me to go into society for several years. He stared and then smiled, and in his usual caressing gallant manner said, I should do as I liked. He would never contradict me in anything. He only hoped that he should be always able to please and gratify me. My uncle's story is soon told. He married, very early in life, a girl of inferior rank. His relations were exceedingly enraged and discarded him. His father died, and his grandfather, fearing that he would sell his expectations and squander the whole property, offered him a large immediate income, upon condition that he would entail the estate upon his eldest son. He consented. A few years after, his grandfather died, and he came into the titles and estate. The new Lady Grey made herself many friends from the extreme propriety of her conduct. They had a large family but lost many children, and she died in childbed of her youngest. 5 only survived. The eldest son was abroad. 2 daughters were well married, and the youngest, a girl of only 12 years of age, lived with her governess at the family seat at Hampshire. Sir Richard talked kindly of his children, but chiefly of his eldest son, against whom therefore I conceived a prejudice, because from his father's description I considered him dissipated and worthless. Such indeed was my uncle, but I did not dislike him, for by the charm of manner he vanquished aversion, and I transferred to his favorite son the disapprobation he had at first excited. I was glad to hear that my cousin was at Vienna, and that I was not likely to see him. We arrived at Beech Grove on the 29th August. It was a fine summer day, and the country in all its glory. The house was spacious and elegant, and situated in an extensive park, laid out with infinite taste, and kept up with extreme care. All looked so gay and smiling, so unlike the somber scenes I had left on the shores of the dark northern ocean, that I contemplated my new abode with distaste. Such is the force of habit. My uncle had expected that I should be enchanted with the novel beauty of an English park and mansion, and was disappointed at my languid praise. There were no rocks, no sea, no extensive moors. Groves of beech, a river threading verdant wooded banks, a variety of upland and valley, glade and copse, did not command my admiration. So true it is that we seldom admire that which is absolutely new. A few months totally altered this first impression. The cheerfulness of the scene imperceptibly acted on my spirits. I became reconciled to its, to a certain degree, tameness, and learned at last to love its refined and elegant beauty. Sir Richard talked of visiting and company. He would have called his neighbors round us, and forced me to accept invitations at the various houses, where, in the shooting season, were assembled large parties of the rich and gay. I earnestly assured him that my depressed spirits and deep-rooted sorrow needed tranquility, that the seclusion which his house promised was its principal attraction, that I was most happy to be alone. He could not believe my assertions. It hurt his feelings to leave me in this desert. He actually delayed his departure for 2 days, not liking to quit me. At last he went, and speedily, in the pursuit of pleasure, forgot my existence. I was not absolutely alone in his house. My cousin Marian inhabited it with me. She was a pretty, agreeable girl of 12 years of age, and we got on very well together. I had recourse to her society when overweary of thought, and she was so young that I could leave her, and betake myself to my mournful, lonely reveries, whenever I liked, without ceremony. I had not been at Beech Grove more than a week, when late one afternoon, on returning from a drive, we distinguished lights in the dining room. "Can it be my brother?" cried Marian. "Can Clinton have arrived?" "I hope not," I said. "Oh, do not say so," replied the little girl. "You would love Clinton, he is so lively and dear, everybody loves him." She scarce waited for the steps to be let down, but jumped from the carriage. She returned to me in a minute with an air of disappointment. "It is only my brother Vernon," she said. "And you do not care about him?" "Oh yes," she replied. "Vernon is very good and all that. But he is quite different from Clinton. He may stay a month in the house and I not see him twice." The habit of solitude had rendered me a little bashful. I had dined early with my cousin, and the newcomer was at dinner. I went into the drawing room therefore and made her stay with me and awaited his entrance with some alarm. He soon joined us. As he entered, I was struck with his being the handsomest man I had ever seen. His complexion was a clear olive, his eyes a dark blue, his head small and well-shaped, his figure scarcely above the middle size, but slender and elegant. I expected the courteous manners of my uncle to correspond with the grace of his appearance, but Vernon had no vivacity, no softness. His words were pregnant with meaning, and his eyes flashed fire as he spoke, but his address was abrupt, his conversation pointed and sarcastic, and a disagreeable ironical smile in which he indulged deteriorated greatly from his good looks. Still, he was very handsome, very clever, and very entertaining. One part of Marian's description at least was erroneous. He spent every day and all day with us. He rode or walked with us in the morning, read to us in the evening, conversed as we worked or painted, and did all that a person most sedulous to please could do, except turning over the leaves of our music books. He did not like music, of which my father was so passionately fond. In all else his taste seemed mine. He gave me Italian lessons, and, except when I drove him away, was never absent from our side. Marian declared that her brother Vernon was an altered man. I thought that I knew whence the alteration sprung. What girl of 18, just emerged from solitude, could perceive the birth of love in the heart of a young, accomplished, and handsome man, and not feel her vanity gratified? My peculiar education had prevented my having any of the coquettishness of beauty or the insolence of wealth. I own I felt elated. I became of consequence in my own eyes, and my silly heart swelled with conscious triumph. Vernon grew each day more openly devoted to me, more solicitous to please, more flattering and attentive. He advanced with imperceptible steps to the desired bourne, and no impatience of temper disturbed for a moment his progress. Stealthy as a serpent, and as wily, he became necessary to my comfort, and I had compromised myself by displaying my vain triumph in my conquest before he betrayed himself by a word. When I found that he sought a return for his love, I was frightened. I discovered that with all his talents and agreeable qualities I scarcely liked him, and certainly could never feel a sentiment more tender than friendship. I reproached myself for my ingratitude. I felt ashamed of my vacillation. He saw my struggles. He was all humility. He did not deserve better. He was satisfied if I would only be a sister to him, pity him, endure his presence. I agreed, and reassumed my familiarity and good humor. It is impossible to describe his refined artifice, or the wonderful assiduity with which he watched by his concealed net till I was completely enmeshed. He contrived first that I should consent to listen to him talking of his passion. Then he excited my pity for his sufferings. He was eloquent in describing them and in exalting my merits. He asked for so little, he seemed so humble, but he was importunate, and never gave up the smallest advantage he had once gained. Forgotten by my uncle, unknown and unregarded by the rest of the world, I was delivered over to his machinations. Day after day he renewed them. He discerned and worked upon every weakness of my character. My fear to do wrong, my alarm at the idea of being the occasion of pain, my desire to preserve my integrity without a flaw, these might be termed virtues, but distorted and exaggerated by natural conceit and youthful inexperience, they rendered me a too easy prey. At last he extracted from me a promise to marry him when I should be of age. This pledge seemed the only method left me to prove my delicacy and truth. I gave it the more readily because I admired his talents, and believed that he deserved a better wife than I, and that my want of love was a fault in me for which I ought to compensate to him. With all the rashness and inexperience of my age, I confess that I even tried to conceal my latent aversion. So that when, after having obtained my promise, he went away for a week, I willingly assented to his request that I should correspond with him, and my letters were full of affection. I found it easier to write than speak what I did not really feel, and was glad to show my gratitude and my sense of his attachment at an easy rate. At the same time, I consented to keep our engagement secret, that thus I might have an excuse for preserving the reserve of my conduct. I took advantage of this wish on his part to insist on his leaving me for a time. I was glad when he went, yet mortified at the readiness of his obedience. I must not be unjust. Vernon had many faults, but coldness of feeling was not among them. Vehemence and passion were his characteristics, though he could unite them to a deliberation in design and a wiliness in execution without example. He had determined before he saw me to win me and my fortune, but such was the violence of his disposition that he was unavoidably caught in his own toils, and the project that was founded on self-interest ended in making him the slave of love, of a girl whom he despised. He went when I bade him eagerly, but he fulfilled his aim better by so doing. My letters were to be confirmations strong against me, in case that hereafter, as he too justly feared, I should wish to retract my vows. I heedlessly accomplished his ends, beyond his most sanguine expectations. My letters were those of a betrothed bride, and what they might want in tenderness was made up by their uncompromising acknowledgment of our relative position. Having obtained these testimonies, he returned. I was not sorry. I was too little pleased with myself to be in love with solitude. His presence kept alive the feeling of irresistible fate to which I had yielded, and his society enlivened the monotonous quiet of Beech Grove. At length Christmas came, and my uncle returned and filled his house with visitors. Then the darker shades of Vernon's character became apparent. He was as jealous as an Italian. His disposition was somber and averse to sociable pleasures. God knows grief sat too heavy at my heart to allow me to be very vivacious. Still, I wished to please my uncle, and thought that I had no right to cloud the good humor of the company. And added to this was the elastic spirit of youth, which sprung eagerly and spontaneously from the gloom and mystery of Vernon's artifices into the more congenial atmosphere of friendly intercourse. He saw me unlike anything he had ever seen in me before, sprightly, and ready to share the amusement of the hour. He groaned in bitterness of spirit. He reproached, reprehended, and became a very taskmaster. I was naturally timid and docile. In vain did my spirit revolt from his injustice. He gained and kept complete ascendancy over me. Yet my soul was in arms against him even while I submitted to his control, and dislike began to develop itself in my bosom. I tasked myself severely for my ingratitude. I became in appearance kinder than ever, but every internal struggle and every outward demonstration had unfortunately one result: to alienate my affections more and more from my lover-cousin. Our guests left us. My uncle went up to town. He told me he hoped I would accompany him there as soon as Lady Hythe returned to chaperone me, but I was more averse than ever to visiting London. Bound to Vernon by my promises, and wishing to keep my faith with him, I did not like to expose myself to the temptation of seeing others I should like better. Besides, the memory of my father was still unfaded, and I resolved not to appear in public till the year of mourning was expired. Vernon accompanied his father to town, but returned again to us almost immediately. We appeared to revert to our former mode of life, but the essence of it was changed. He was moody, I anxious. I almost ventured to accuse him of ill temper and tyranny, till, reading in my own heart its indifference, I was inclined to consider myself the cause of his discontent. I tried to restore his complacency by kindness, and in some degree succeeded. One day Sir Richard suddenly appeared at Beech Grove. He seemed surprised to find Vernon, and care and even anxiety clouded his usual hilarity. He told us that he expected Clinton daily, and should immediately on his arrival bring him down to Hampshire. To celebrate my birthday, asked Vernon with a sardonic smile, I am of age on Friday. No, said his father, he will not be here so soon. Nor I so honored, said Vernon. Clinton's coming of age was celebrated by tumultuous rejoicings, but he is the elder son. Sir Richard gave Vernon, who spoke sneeringly, a quick glance. An indescribable expression of pain crossed his countenance. Have you been staying here since Christmas? He asked at last. Vernon would have replied evasively, but Marian said, Oh yes, he is always here now. You appear to have become very fond of Beech Grove of a sudden, continued his father. I felt that Sir Richard's eye was fixed on me as he spoke, and I was conscious that not only my cheeks, but my temples and neck were crimsoned with blushes. Some time after I saw my uncle in the shrubbery. He was alone, and the want of society was always so painful to him that I thought it but a mark of duteous kindness to join him. I wondered as I approached to see every token of haggard care on a face usually so smiling. He saw me and smoothed his brow. He began talking of London, of my elder cousin, of his desire that I should conquer my timidity and consent to be presented this spring. At length he suddenly stopped short, and scrutinizing me as he spoke, said, "Pardon me, dear Ellen, if I annoy you, but I am your guardian, your second father, am I not? Do not be angry, therefore, if I ask you, are you attached to my son Vernon?" My natural frankness prompted one reply, but 1,000 feelings, inexplicable but powerful, hung on my tongue. I answered, stammering, "No, I believe so, I like him." "But you do not love him." "What a question, dear uncle," I replied, covered with confusion. "Is it even so?" cried Sir Richard, "and is he to succeed in all?" "You mistake," I said, for I had a horror of confessing an attachment which, after all, I did not feel, and so of making our engagement more binding. But I blushed deeply as I spoke, and my uncle looked incredulous and said, "Yet it would make you very unhappy if he married another." "Oh no," I cried, "he has my free leave. I should wish him joy with all my heart." The idea, the hope that he was playing me false, and might release me from my trammels, darted through my mind with a quick thrill of delight. Sir Richard saw that I was in earnest, and his countenance cleared. "What a strange thing is maiden coyness," he observed. "You blushed so prettily, Ellen, that I could have sworn you had given your heart to Vernon. But I see I was mistaken. I am glad of it, for he would not suit you." No more was said, but I felt conscience-stricken and miserable. I had deceived my uncle, and yet I had not. I had declared that I did not love him to whom I had pledged my hand, and the whole was a mystery and an entanglement that degraded me in my own eyes. I longed to make a full confession, yet then all would be over, we should both be inextricably bound. As it was, some caprice might cause Vernon to transfer his affection to another, and I could give him entire freedom, without any human being knowing how foolishly I had acted. We had no guests at dinner. Sir Richard was to leave us early the next morning. After dinner, I speedily retired to the drawing-room, leaving father and son together. They remained 2 hours. I was on the point of withdrawing to my own room, to avoid a meeting which alarmed me, I knew not why, when they entered. It seemed as if, in the interval of my absence, they had received sudden intelligence of a dear friend's death. And yet not quite so, for though Vernon looked absorbed in thought, his gloom was strangely interspersed with glances of swelling triumph. His smiles were no longer sneers, yet they did not betray a sunshine of the heart, but rather joy on a bad victory. He looked on me askance, with a kind of greedy satisfaction, and at his father with scorn. I trembled and turned to my uncle, but sadness and confusion marked his features. He was stamped as with disgrace and quailed beneath my eye, though presently he rallied, drew a chair near, and was kinder than ever. He told me that he was going up to town on the morrow, and that Vernon was to accompany him. He asked me if there was anything he could do for me, and testified his affection by 1,000 little attentions. Vernon said nothing, and took leave of me so coldly that I thought his manner implied that he expected to see me in the morning. Thinking it right to indulge him, I rose early, but he did not come down till long after Sir Richard, who thanked me for my kindness in disturbing myself on his account. They went away immediately after breakfast, and Vernon's formal adieu again struck me with wonder. Was it possible that he was indeed going to marry another? This doubt was all my comfort, for I was painfully agitated by the false position in which I had entangled myself, by the mystery that enveloped my actions, and the falsehood which my lips perpetually implied, if they did not utter. I was habitually an early riser. On the 3rd morning after the departure of my relations, before I rose, and while I was dressing, I thought that pebbles were thrown at my window. But my mind was too engrossed to pay attention, till at last, after my toilette had been leisurely completed, I looked from my window and saw Vernon below in the secluded part of the park which it overlooked. I hurried down, my heart palpitating with anxiety. "I have been waiting for you these 2 hours," he said angrily. "Did you not hear my signal?" "I know of no signal," I replied. "I am not accustomed to clandestine appointments." "And yet you can carry on a clandestine engagement excellently well. You told Sir Richard that you did not love me, that you should be glad if I married another." An indignant reply was bursting from my lips, but he saw the rising storm and hastened to allay it. He changed his tone at once from reproach to tender protestations. "It broke my heart to leave you as I did," he said, "but I could do no less. Sir Richard insisted on my accompanying him. I was obliged to comply. Even now he believes me to be in town. I have traveled all night. He half suspected me, because I refused to dine with him today, and I was forced to promise to join him at a ball tonight. I need not be there till 12 or 1, and so can stay 2 hours with you." "But why this hurried journey?" I asked. "Why do you come?" He answered by pleading the vehemence of his affection, and spoke of the risk he ran of losing me forever. "Do you not know," he said, "that my father has set his heart upon your marrying my brother?" "He is very good," I replied disdainfully, "but I am not a slave, to be bought and sold. My cousin Clinton is the last person in the world whom you need fear." "Oh, Ellen, how much do you transport me by this generous contempt for wealth and rank? You ask why I am here. It were worth the fatigue, twice 10,000 times told, to have these assurances. I have trembled, I have feared, but you will not love this favored of fortune, this elder son." I cannot describe Vernon's look as he said this. Methought envy, malice, and demoniac exultation were all mingled. He laughed aloud. I shrunk from him dismayed. He became calmer a moment after. "My life is in your hands, Ellen," he said, but why repeat his glossing speeches, in which deceit and truth were so kneaded into one mass, that the poison took the guise of the wholesome substance, while the whole was impregnated with destruction? I felt that I liked him less than ever, yet I yielded to his violence. I believed myself the victim of a venial but irreparable mistake of my own. I confirmed my promises, and pledged my faith most solemnly. It is true that I undeceived him as much as I could with regard to the extent of my attachment. At first he was furious at my coldness, then overwhelmed me with entreaties for forgiveness. Tears even streamed from his eyes, and then again he haughtily reminded me that I forfeited every virtue of my sex, and became a monument of falsehood if I failed him. We separated at last. I promised to write every day, and saw him ride away with a sensation, as if relieved from the infliction of the torture. A week after this scene, my spirits still depressed, and often weeping my dear father's death, which I considered the root of every evil, I was reading, or rather trying to read, in my dressing room, but in reality brooding over my sorrows, when I heard Marian's cheerful laugh in the shrubbery, and her voice calling me to join her. I roused myself from my sad reverie, and resolved to cast aside care and misery, while Vernon's absence afforded me a shadow of freedom, and, in fulfillment of this determination, went down to join my young, light-hearted cousin. She was not alone. Clinton was with her. There was no resemblance between him and Vernon. His countenance was all sunshine. His light blue eyes laughed in their own gladness and purity. His beaming smile, his silver-toned voice, his tall, manly figure, and above all his open-hearted, engaging manners were all the reverse of his dark, mysterious brother. I saw him and felt that my prejudices had been ridiculous. We became intimate in a moment. I know not how it was, but we seemed like brother and sister, each feeling, each thought, being laid bare to the other. I was naturally frank, but rendered timid by education, so that it charmed me doubly when the unreserve of another invited me to indulge in the unguarded confidence of my disposition. How speedily the days now flew! They contained but one drawback, my correspondence with my cousin. Not that I felt myself unfaithful towards him. My affection for my newfound relation did not disturb my conscience. That was pure, undisguised, sisterly. We had met from across the ocean of life, two beings who formed a harmonized whole, but the sympathy was too perfect, too untinged by earthly dross, to be compared with the selfish love given and exacted by Vernon. Yet I feared that his jealousy might be awakened, while I felt less inclined than ever to belie my own heart, and with aversion and hesitation, penned letters containing the formula of affection and engaged vows. Sir Richard came down to Beech Grove. He was highly pleased to see the cordial friendship that subsisted between his son and me. "Did I not tell you that you would like him?" he said. "Everyone must," I replied. "He is formed to win all hearts, and suits you much better than Vernon." I did not know what to answer. It was a tender string that he touched, but I resolved not to feel or think. Sir Richard's were all flying visits. He was to leave us in the evening. He had, during the morning, a long conversation with Clinton, and immediately after he sought for an opportunity to talk to me. "Ellen," he said, "I have not been a wise but I am a fond father. I have done Clinton many injuries, of which he, poor fellow, is wholly unconscious, and I have wished to compensate for all in giving him a wife worthy of him. His temper is generous, his spirit clear and noble. By my soul, I think he has every virtue under heaven, and you alone deserve him. Do not interrupt me, I beseech you, hear me this once. I confess that ever since you became my ward this has been my favorite project. There have been several obstacles, but the most serious ones seem to vanish. You have seen each other, and I flatter myself have each discovered and appreciated the good qualities of the other. Is it so, Ellen? I know not whence my fears arise, and yet they intrude themselves. I fear, while I have been endeavoring to secure my boy's happiness, I may have been adding to the ruin already heaped on his head by my means. I have talked with him today. He has no disguise in his nature, and he avows that he loves you. I know that this confession would come better from himself, but your fortune, your beauty, make him fear to be misinterpreted. Do not mistake, he is wholly unaware of my intention of speaking to you. I see your distress, dear Ellen, have patience, but for one word more, do not trifle with Clinton's feelings, as sometimes, forgive me, it has appeared to me that you have trifled with Vernon's. Do not foster hopes not to be fulfilled. Be frank, be honest, despite the bashfulness and coquetry of your sex." After these words, fearful of having offended, overcome by more agitation than I could have imagined him capable of feeling, my uncle drew me towards him, pressed me convulsively to his bosom, and then rushed from the room. I cannot describe the state in which he left me. A spasm of pain passed through my frame. I became sick and faint, till a flood of tears relieved my bursting heart. I wept long, I sobbed in agony, I felt the veriest wretch that ever trod the earth. My uncle had rent the veil that concealed me from myself. I loved Clinton, he was the whole world to me, all the world of light and joy, and I had shut myself out from him forever. And he also was my victim. I beheld his dear face beaming with hope. I heard his thrilling voice harmonized by love, and saw the fearless cordiality of his manners, which bespoke his confidence in my sympathy, while I knew that I held a poisoned dagger which I was about to plunge into his heart. Sometimes I thought to treat him coldly, sometimes. Oh, I cannot tell the various imaginations that haunted me, some self-sacrificing, others wicked and false. All ended in one way. My uncle departed. We were left together, our full hearts beating to respond to each other without any division or reserve. I felt that every moment might cause Clinton to open his soul to me, and to seek in mine for a feeling too truly and too fondly alive there, but which was sinful and fatal to both. To prevent his confession, my own preceded it. I revealed to him my engagement to Vernon, and declared my resolve not to swerve from my faith. He commended me. I saw despair at losing me painted in his countenance, mingled with horror at supplanting his brother, and alarm that he, the elder born, gifted by fortune with every blessing, should be suspected of the intention of stealing the sole remaining good, which Vernon had won by his diligence, perhaps by his deserts. Forbid it, heaven! I saw in the clear mirror of his expressive countenance the struggle of passion and principle, and the triumph of honor and virtue, exalted over the truest love that ever warmed man's breast. Our gaiety was flown, our laughter stilled. We talked sadly and seriously together, neither lamenting our fate nor acknowledging our sufferings, tamed to endurance, and consoling each other by such demonstrations of affection as were permitted to our near relationship. We read clearly each other's hearts, and supported each other in the joint sacrifice, and this without any direct acknowledgement. Clinton talked of returning to the continent, I of my seclusion and tranquility at Beech Grove. The time was distant, 2 years was an eternity at our age, before Vernon could claim my hand, and we did not advert to that fatal consummation. We gave up each other, and that single misery sufficed without a more cruel addition. I was calm, pale, and tearless. I had brought it all on myself and must submit. I could not cast aside the younger son to select the elder, and if in my secret thoughts I cherished a hope to induce Vernon to forgo his claims, that very circumstance would the more entirely divide me from Clinton. As my brother-in-law, I might see him. In some sort, our fortunes were shared. But as a rival to Vernon, a stream of blood separated us forever. The hours of sad sympathy which we passed were very dear to us. We knew that they were brief. Clinton had fixed the day and hour of his departure, each moment it drew nearer. We should never meet again till after my marriage, but till the hour of separation, for 2 short days, We were all in all to each other, despite the wall of adamant which was raised between us. We tried each to pretend to think and talk of indifferent subjects, and we never spoke of that nearest our hearts. But how superfluous are words as interpreters between lovers! As we walked or rode, and spent hours in each other's society, we exchanged thoughts more intimately during long periods of absolute silence than Vernon with his vehemence and eloquence could have conceived. Had we spoken folio volumes, we could have said no more. Our looks, the very casting down of our eyes and mutual tacit avoidance, told our resolve to fulfill our duties and to conquer our love. And yet how, by a glance or a faltering word when the future was alluded to, did we promise never to forget, but to cherish mutual esteem and tenderness as all that was left of the paradise from which we were so ruthlessly driven? Now and then a playful expression on his part, or a blush on mine, betrayed more feeling than we considered right. The one was checked by a sigh, the other by an assumption of indifference. I had been spending many hours in tears and anguish, when, resolved to overcome my weakness, and to recover an appearance of serenity before my cousin returned from his ride, I went into Marian's schoolroom and took up a book. The exhaustion of weeping had calmed me, and I thought of my kinsman, his endearing qualities, and of the tie between us with softened feelings. As I indulged in reverie, my head resting on my hand, my book falling from my fingers, my eyes closed, I passed from the agitated sense of life and sorrow into the balmy forgetfulness of sleep. Clinton had wished to make a portrait of me, yet had not ventured to ask me to sit. He came in at this moment. Marian, whispering, told him not to disturb me. He took her drawing materials and made a hasty sketch, which genius and love united to render a perfect likeness. I awoke and saw his work. It was beyond our contract. I asked him for it. He felt that I was right and gave it. This sacrifice on his part proved that he did not palter with his sense of right. On the morrow we were to part, and he would preserve no memorial beyond a remembrance which he could not destroy. That morrow came. Clinton asked me and his sister to walk through the park with him to join his chariot at the farther lodge. We consented, but at the moment of going, Marian, who knew nothing certainly, but who darkly guessed that all was not right, excused herself. I joined him alone. There was something in his person and manner that so promised protection and tenderness that I felt it doubly hard to be torn from him. A dignified reserve, foreign to his usual nature, founded on a resolve to play only the brother's part, checked me somewhat. Yet I loved him the more for it, while I would have laid down my existence so that it had only been permitted us to throw aside the mask but for one short hour, and to use the language of nature and troth. It could not be, and our conversation was upon indifferent subjects. When we approached the lodge, we found that the chariot had not come, and we retreated a little and sat down on a turfy bank. Then Clinton said a few words, the only ones that at all revealed the agitation he was enduring. "I have a little more experience than you, Ellen," he said. "And besides, I am haunted by strange presentiments. We seem to know what we ought to do, and what we are to do, and act accordingly. Yet life is a strange, wild thing. I wish to ensure for you a friend more willing and active than Sir Richard. I have a sister to whom I am fondly attached. She is now on the continent, but I shall hasten to her, and entreat her to afford you a friendship you so richly deserve. You will love Lady Hythe for her own sake as well as for mine." I was desirous of thanking him for this mark of kindness, but my voice failed me, and I burst into tears. Overcome by the excess of anguish that deluged my heart, I tried to conceal my tears. I could not. "Do not, Ellen, dear Ellen, I beseech you, command yourself." Clinton spoke in a voice so broken, so full of misery, that he inspired me at once with fear and courage. The tread of a horse roused us, a horse at swift gallop. I raised my eyes and uttered a shriek, for reining in the animal with a sudden strong pull, Vernon halted close to us. The most violent passions convulsed his countenance. He threw himself from the horse, and casting the bridle from him, came up. What he meant to say or do I cannot tell, perhaps to conceal the workings of his heart, and the quick departure of Clinton would have smoothed all, but I saw the barrel of a pistol peep from the pocket of his coat. I was seized with terror, I shrieked aloud. Clinton, terrified at my alarm, would have supported me, but Vernon pushed him rudely away. "Dare not to approach or touch her, as you value your life," he cried. "My life, you talk idly, Vernon. I value her security, one moment of peace to her far more." "You confess it," exclaimed Vernon, "and you, too, false and treacherous girl. Ha, did you think to betray me and be unpunished? Do you think, if I so chose it, that I would not force you to look on till the blood of one of the brothers flowed at your feet? But there are other punishments in store for you. The expressions of menace used towards myself restored my courage, and I exclaimed, "Beware that you do not break the tie that binds us, at least, that bound us a moment ago. Perhaps it is already broken." "Doubtless," he cried, grinding his teeth with rage, "it is broken, and a new one created to bind you to the elder son. Oh yes, you would fain cast aside the poor, miserable beggar who has vainly fawned on you and madly loved. You would take the rich, the honorable, and honored Sir Clinton. Base, hollow-hearted fool." "Vernon," said Clinton, "whatever your claims are on our cousin, I cannot stand by and see her insulted. You forget yourself." "The forgetfulness, sir, is on your part. Proud in your seniority, to rival your brother, to drive him from his all, has been a May game for you. But no, proud fool or villain, take which name you will, your hour is passed by, your reign at an end. Your station is a fiction, your very existence a disgrace." Clinton and I both began to think that Vernon was really mad, a suspicion confirmed by his violent gestures. We looked at each other in alarm. "Stay," exclaimed the infuriated man, seizing my arm with a fierce grasp. While fearful to induce Clinton's interference, I yielded. "Stay, and listen to what your lover is, or shall I wound your delicate ears? There are soft phrases and silken words to adorn that refuse of the world, a bastard." "Vernon dare not. Beware, sir, and begone." Clinton's face crimsoned. His voice, his majestic indignation almost forced the ruffian to quail. He threw my arm from him. "Take him, fair Ellen. It is true you take what I say, a natural son. Do you think that my information is not correct? Ask our father, for he is yours, Clinton, and our mother is the same. You are the firstborn of Richard Grey and Matilda Towers, but I am the eldest son of Mr. and Mrs. Grey." It could not have been that Vernon would have acted this cowardly and foolish part had he not been driven by a kind of madness. In truth, Sir Richard had, to quench his hopes forever with that carelessness of truth, his fatal propensity, affirmed that Clinton and I were acknowledged lovers, and he came goaded by worse than jealousy, by a spirit of hatred and revenge. Seeing us together, obviously engaged by the most engrossing feelings, his temper, which had been worked into fury during his journey, burst forth beyond the bounds he had prescribed for himself. I have called him a serpent, and such he was in every respect. He could crawl and coil and hide his wily advance, but he could erect his crest, dart out his forked tongue, and infix the deadly venom, when roused as he now was. Clinton turned alternately pale and red. "Be it as you will," he said. "My fortunes and yours are of slight moment in comparison to Ellen's safety. If there is any truth in this tale of yours, there will be time enough to discover it and to act upon it. Meanwhile, dear cousin, I see they have brought my chariot to the lodge. You cannot walk home, get into it. It will drive you to the house and come back for me." I looked at him inquiringly. "Do not fear to be deserted by me," he said, "or that I shall do anything rashly. Vernon must accompany me to town, to our father's presence, there to expiate this foul calumny or to prove it. Be assured he shall not approach you without your leave. I will watch over him and guard you." Clinton spoke aloud, and Vernon became aware that he must yield to this arrangement, and satisfied that he had divided us. Clinton led me to his carriage. "You will hear soon from some one of us, Ellen," he said, "and let me implore you to be patient, to take care of yourself, to fear nothing. I can make no remark, affirm, deny nothing now, but you shall not be kept in suspense. Promise me to be patient and calm." "And do you," I said at last, commanding my trembling voice, "promise not to be rash, and promise not to leave England without seeing me again." "I promise not to leave England for any time without your leave. Oh, trust me, my dear cousin. It is not in such storms as these that you shall be ashamed of me. One sentiment may subdue me, but poverty, disgrace, and every angry passion I can master." Vernon did not dare interrupt us. He felt that he had destroyed his carefully woven web through his own rashness, and gnawed his lips in silent rage. I looked at him once and turned away my eyes in contempt. I got into the chariot, it drove me to the house, and went back to take Clinton up to town. Thus we were separated as we intended, and yet how differently. Hope was reborn in my heart, out of the very ashes of its despair.